So we've just had the newest patch, patch 7.05, which brought with it the newest Arcadian Savage raids and a few Black Mage changes. Let's go over them. The first update we got was something that I predicted a while back but wasn't actually expecting we get right now. Umbral Soul now locks your Umbral Ice timer at 15 seconds. As well, if you're out of combat, like in a dungeon, it will instantly grant you Umbral Ice 3 so you don't have to press it multiple times. Now in Ultimate Encounters where there's quite a lot of downtime, this is also a great change since you don't have to spam Umbral Soul for an extended period of time, only a few times to get to max hearts and Umbral Ice stacks. Thankfully, with patch 7.01 a few weeks ago, Umbral Soul is also now a level 35 ability, which makes the lower level experience quite a bit better. Secondly, Flare's damage falloff has changed from 40% less for their enemies to 30% less. This makes Black Mage's AOE rotation a little bit stronger in dungeons. Next, they've buffed some of our most commonly used spells in our single target rotation. Fire 4 and Blizzard 4 have been buffed from 310 potency to 320 potency each. Keep in mind that Fire 4 is affected by the Astral Fire multiplier, so this 10 potency boost is a little bit more. Despair has also been buffed from 340 potency to 350 potency. Next, they've also changed High Thunder and also the previous iteration Thunder 3. For High Thunder, previously it was 200 on-hit damage and 550 potency on the dot for 750 potency total, which matches our old Thunderclap proc from Endwalker. Now, it's 150 potency on the initial application, but the dot has been increased to 60 potency, which makes the total dot 600. So the overall potency is still the same as 750. They've simply just reallocated more damage to the dot rather than the initial application. Next, one of the biggest changes that they did in the patch for Black Mage, Paradox has been buffed to 520 potency, and more importantly, Umbral Ice Paradox is back. Finally, after many complaints from both the English and Japanese community, the iconic skill is back to functioning the same way it has been since Endwalker. And let me tell you, playing Black Mage in Savage right now feels so much better than playing Release Dawntrail Black Mage without Paradox. The difference is literally night and day, and you have so much needed mobility now. I'm glad this is finally back, but also I don't think this is something that they should have even removed in the first place, so I'm happy but also frustrated at the same time that this situation even happened at all. Now that we have Paradox back, using short fire lines is now easier, although if using multiple Fire 4s, it will still require Blizzard 4 in order to get mana back. These short fire lines are still not a huge gain, but they are much welcomed for alignment purposes. And of course, no Black Mage buff patch list is complete without an Enochian buff. Enochian has now been buffed from 30% to a 33% magic damage multiplier. Place your bets in the comment section for what you think Enochian will be at the end of the expansion. Now, in Asphodelos back in Endwalker, there was a patch 6.08 which came out 3 weeks after Savage, which further buffed jobs including Black Mage. It would not surprise me if we have a patch 7.08 in the last couple of weeks of August that also further buff Black Mage as well as any other potentially underperforming jobs. I think everyone is aware that Pictomancer is quite strong, dare I say overpowered. It is much more flexible than Black Mage as well as synergizes much stronger with raid buffs than Black Mage. Prior to the 7.05 buffs, many theory crafters were doing math that shows that Black Mage would need around a 10% damage buff to be roughly equivalent to Pictomancer. The changes we see here in patch 7.05 amount to just around a 5% damage boost, which is not as much as we were expecting, so I think it still needs quite a bit more potency buffs to be even with Pictomancer. But before talking about what potency updates I'd want, I want to first cover some gameplay related problems that I currently have with the job. The first one is Thunderhead. I'm going to be blunt, this buff seems completely pointless. It's a 30-second buff that lets you cast your dot, which also lasts for 30 seconds. I actually don't see a good reason why this is even still here. High Thunder is basically functioning like a healer dot, but has these artificially placed restrictions on when you can and can't use it. There are also situations when your spell speed is low and you have a long fire phase that you can't even refresh your High Thunder before the Thunderhead buff falls off. I think if they're going to keep Thunderhead in the game, they should increase its duration to 40 seconds at least to match old Endwalker Thunder procs. Or Just get rid of the system entirely so that in fights like DSR, where you want to double dot enemies, it's possible to do so without switching stances. Another thing I dislike about the new Thunder is that they doubled down on making the damage more focused on the dot and not the actual on-hit application in this patch. It's now much more punishing to accidentally clip your Thunder duration. I would prefer it if the balance of dot and on-hit was changed. If they don't want to go back to Endwalker style where it was 400 potency on-hit and 350 for the dot, there's also an option to go for something like 300 on-hit and 450 dot. Just something that makes it feel less bad when you want to use Thunder for movement. The second one for me is Flare Star. This ability is interesting. I don't think it feels super satisfying to use generally. One of my main gripes with it is that the progress towards the astral gauge resets when you transpose. It makes moments where there's downtime very restrictive in terms of not being able to get your Flare Star off in time. Take M4S for example. I'm sure many have been in situations where you get knocked to the second platform before you can even finish your fire phase. So now all the progress you've made to Flare Star is effectively lost since you need to transpose an Umbral Soul in that downtime. The second part about Flare Star is that its potency has also been a topic for discussion. It's 400 potency, which turns into 720 potency under the effect of Astral Fire 3. It's weaker than Xenoglossy, which is 880 potency. I do think Flare Star should be a bit stronger, but also Square Enix has to be careful with how much they buff Flare Star because the stronger you make it, it also potentially makes single target flare more viable, since you can get 3 Astral Soul stacks from it. And I don't think single target flare is something they really want you to do. I also wouldn't mind it if Flare Star was always an instant cast. This would make it feel snappier and like a true finisher after Despair. While you're at it, why not make it refresh Astral Fire, although this one isn't super a big deal. The last one is the AOE Rotation, and this one is particularly egregious. I'm not sure why they got rid of the enhanced flare mechanic that they brought in Endwalker. High Fire 2 and High Blizzard 2 are still so laughably bad that it's better to not cast them at all and simply use Freeze and Transpose, along with Flare in Astral Fire 1 and a second Flare, followed by Flare Star. This is so much better than the regular AOE rotation, and I'm still not sure why they haven't changed it. I know AOE is not really a huge thing looked at by the player base, since pretty much all endgame raids and trials are single target, but it's still something we interact with quite regularly in content like dungeon roulettes and fates. I think many other people share similar sentiments to mine based on what I've seen in the community in the official forums, Reddit, and Discord chats. Some people say things like maybe they should just get rid of the Astral Fire and Umbral Ice timer, which I think is a terrible idea by the way, as that's pretty much the whole point of the job. Or maybe make the cast times lower than the recast for Black Mage so they can weave after their casts, similar to Pictomancer as an example. I also don't like this because it removes some of the agency that players had with planning when to use their instance for weaving and movement. I think Square Enix was intentionally light with the buffs in this patch, since they wouldn't want to overdo it and then have to potentially correct afterwards. So I think in patch 7.08, we may see further balance changes to Black Mage. I think the skills we saw buffed now are probably not going to get buffed again, so it's probably going to be something like 10 potency to Blizzard 3 and Fire 3, maybe 20 to 50 potency to Xenoglossy, and probably Enochian from 33% to 35% because why not? I would also like them to buff High Thunder. It seems weird to me that right now it's exactly the same potency as our old Endwalker Thunder proc at 750 total. I would expect with the new expansion and an upgraded skill, we'd actually see higher potency numbers here. I'd like to see its potency increased and, as previously mentioned, made more balanced between the initial application and the damage over time, perhaps to something like 850 total potency when factoring both in. Thanks everyone for watching my mini rant here. I really like that Square Enix appears to be listening to the community as they've brought back Ice Paradox, but I still think there's a ways to go to clean up some of the clunkiness that they've added in Dawntrail. Make sure to stay tuned to the channel because I will be releasing a Black Mage guide in the coming weeks.